I've compiled the best clips on Israel-Palestine debates in one video. So if you enjoy watching genocide defenders getting cooked, then grab your popcorn and enjoy the show.
Was Israel justified in carrying out one of the most intense civilian punishment campaigns in history? Was Israel justified in telling people to go to safe zones and then bombing them and killing them in those safe zones? Was Israel justified in killing a record number of kids in Gaza, 16,000 children, turning Gaza into a graveyard for children? Was Israel justified in killing a record number of aid workers? Was Israel justified in starving the people of Gaza, using food and water as a weapon of war? Was Israel justified in blocking aid trucks from going into Gaza? Was Israel justified in raping, sodomizing Palestinian detainees who are charged with no crimes whatsoever? Is that rape and torture justified, Elon? Israel may have military goals, but the way they're carried out, killing innocent people, starving people, is criminal.
If the Israeli army wanted to kill as many people as they can, there'd be no people left there.
I try to see things from Israeli point of view. I understand that there's like a lot of anti-Semitism, there's a lot of people hate us, and that's why we need to kill as many Hamas people and we need to eradicate Hamas. But I don't think that's enough. Because so far, 40,000 people killed. Those people have families who have children that will be alive, right? Those people, do you think they will love Israel anymore?
No.
So they will be hating Israel.
New generation of enemies.
So what should we do? Israel should kill those people too. And when Israel is comfortable enough with killing as many people and taking as much land, and it's safe, you will have another problem. You'll have all of the Arab countries and the Muslim countries around. Do you think they will love Israel? No. So you eliminate and kill those countries too. And then by the time that Israel is comfortable, you will have a bigger problem. You have all of these white people in colleges that are against Israel. That's a lot of anti-Semitism. So we will only be safe if Israel is safe, and Israel will be safe if all of us are dead.
If Hamas was hiding in Israel, would you still approve of the Israeli collateral damage approach to eradicating Hamas?
I don't approve of any of
I think this is a really important question. Whenever I hear the phrase collateral damage, or I hear objections to language or claims that it's not the same, do you think that if Hamas was hiding in Israel, the Israeli army would be pursuing the same tactics with regard to civilian life?
No, I don't.
Well, there it is. Why not?
Because there would be Israelis there. They would care more about Israeli lives than Palestinian lives. But they're also...
And that's it. That's all I wanted.
How dare can someone call Israel the only democracy in the Middle East when in its backyard there is one of the most cruel, brutal tyrannies in the world? How can you do it? Can you be half pregnant? Can you be half democratic? Can you be a democracy in the front and a tyranny in your backyard? And here comes the next lie that we should fight. Israel had never stopped building settlements. And anyone who builds one house in the occupied territories have no intention whatsoever to put an end to the occupation.
Israel has a right to exist, and if your answer is no, why do the Palestinians have a right to exist?
Israel does exist. It's a fact. The question of its right is not a question that I would be faced with any other country. But I am offended by the idea of states built on ethnocracy, no matter where they are. I would not want a state where any group of people lay down their citizenship rights based on ethnicity. The country of Israel is a state in which half the population exists on one tier of citizenship, and everybody else that's ruled by Israelis exists on another tier, including Palestinian Israeli citizens. The only people that exist on that first tier are Israeli Jews. Why do we support that? Why is that okay?
You were accused of being a, quote, self-hating Jew. What's your response to that quite common yet very serious accusation?
Well, my response is a completely rational one. Let's say it's true, for argument's sake, that I'm a self-hating Jew. What does that have to do with the facts? I mean, if Einstein was a self-hating Jew, for argument's sake, does that mean E does not equal MC squared? What do the facts have to do with what I am or what I'm not? If I were a self-loving Jew, would that mean everything I say is true?
So, 50,000 deaths later, I don't understand how we're still debating this. Justified? Justified? Was Israel justified in carrying out one of the most intense civilian punishment campaigns in history, dropping 500-pound bombs, 1,000-pound bombs, 2,000-pound bombs on schools, hospitals, universities, bookstores, libraries, mosques, churches, refugee camps, apartment buildings, cemeteries, destroying a higher percentage of buildings in northern Gaza than the Allies destroyed in Dresden during World War II, reducing Gaza to 42 million tons of rubble, dropping a bomb on a 6-story apartment building, killing more than 100 people inside, including more than 50 children, with no Hamas target in sight, according to Human Rights Watch. Was Israel justified in telling people to go to safe zones and then bombing them? And there were 7 deadly airstrikes in areas that the Israeli military had specifically designated as safe zones. Was Israel justified in killing a record number of kids in Gaza, 16,000 children, turning Gaza into what the UN has called a graveyard for children?
Here's what I don't get with you, Norman. You're someone who called Israel a lunatic state. You called President Obama a stupefying narcissist, devoid of any principles, every bit as wretched as his predecessors. You called the Palestinian Authority a gang of corrupt, wretched collaborators. And yet your solution to the conflict involves those corrupt collaborators doing a deal with that lunatic state under the supervision of a wretched, narcissistic president. How does that work?
Hey.
To go back to October the 7th, do you condemn what happened that day?
Well, I have to first correct you on something. It was by no means the single biggest slaughter in the Israel-Palestine chapter.
In one day?
In one day. In fact, in 5 hours, with Sharon on the roof shining a searchlight into the Sabra and Shatila camps in Beirut. 3,850 Palestinian women and children. There were only women and children because the men had all agreed to sail away to Tunisia as part of an American brokered deal. So that's triple the actual death toll. But the fact that you thought that this was the biggest single day of slaughter is part of the problem. The lives, the blood of Palestinians is oftentimes by commentators and politicians regarded as less valuable than the blood of Israelis.
I may be the only Republican in Congress who hasn't done homework for AIPAC. What it is, it's conditioning. They just want to know that you'll do something for them. And if you'll do something for them as a candidate, you're more likely to do something for them as a congressman when you get in there. I have Republicans who come to me and say, that's wrong what AIPAC is doing to you. Let me talk to my AIPAC person. By the way, everybody but me has an AIPAC person.
What does that mean, an AIPAC person?
It's like your babysitter, your AIPAC babysitter, who is always talking to you for AIPAC. And it's literally what we call them, my AIPAC guy. I'll talk to my AIPAC guy and see if I can get him to, dial those ads back.
Why have I never heard this before?
It was live in peace. I think what Israel wants to do is have pieces of other people's land. He said Israel should be military occupied.
Absolutely.
What I'm saying to you is, according to international law, there cannot be occupation of one sovereign nation over another. It doesn't seem like you care about international law. What do you mean? Yeah.
Wrong. No, you're just wrong.
Okay, just be quiet
United
for a
States
second.
occupied Japan. The United States occupied Germany. Great Britain occupied Germany.
Be quiet. Whether the United States of America did it or not is not an indication of the legality of something. Occupation
It's legal.
If what you're saying is true, why have the organs of the United Nations condemned the occupation?
Big issue is Gaza.
I am a friend of President Biden, and I've been very supportive of a lot of his domestic initiatives. But on this issue, he is wrong. I can't even explain to you why there are so few Democrats in the Senate, at least, who are prepared to vote against money for Netanyahu. That's right. It has a lot to do with AIPAC, it has a lot to do with money in politics. Poll after poll shows that the American people are not supportive of what Netanyahu is doing. So to answer your question, what we have got to do in a grassroots way is say to the Democratic Party is that the policies that you have right now regarding Netanyahu are wrong. And if you really want to get young people involved in this campaign, the time is now to change those policies.
125 countries, if Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant step in, they will be arrested, which is why Alan Dershowitz is having a fit. It's because the ICC has always been used against official enemies. It's been a tool of imperialism. And for the first time, we are seeing justice done for Western war criminals and their allies. And thankfully, the ICC saved the reputation of international law. The whole world is appalled by what we are supporting. Can I make one more point? One thing you said was correct. This is not just Israeli war criminals we're talking about. We're talking about war criminals in London and Washington too. I'm in London now. I want to talk about the participation, not complicity, participation of my own government.
And do you agree that Palestinians have committed war crimes too in the past?
Prior to October 7th, I don't think many people were engaged with what is happening in Israel. We kind of all said the same thing. Israel is our friend and ally. Post October 7th, the world, and especially I would say Zionists in media, were demanding that we all pay attention. When we began to pay attention, we didn't like what we saw. You cannot tell me to ever feel comfortable with 18,000 children being ruthlessly murdered. You can't get me to feel comfortable as a Christian with the amount of more explosives that's dropped on Gaza than were dropped in Hiroshima. This doesn't make sense to me. Gaza is 30 miles long, 7 miles wide. It's incredibly dense population. And this is, by the way, according to Haaretz, that 40,000 Palestinians have been murdered. And here's what I would like to say to you, Rabbi, since you're quoting scripture, okay? The one that's relevant to me is woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness. And if you'd like to dive into a little more scripture, I think what's relevant is Revelation 3:9. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. And I'm speaking directly to you, Rabbi Shmuley.
I was born in Israel. I care about Israel. I belong to Israel. I'm attached to Israel. It's not about peace. It's not about symmetry. There is no symmetry. I would even suggest that there is no conflict. Was there a French-Algerian conflict? There was a brutal French occupation in Algeria, which came to its end. And there is no Israeli-Palestinian conflict. There is a brutal Israeli occupation which must come to its end one way or the other. There is a regime which is today by far one of the most cruel, brutal tyrannies on earth. I know what I say because I cover it for 40 years. Two peoples live on one piece of land. One people has all the rights in the world. The other people has no rights whatsoever. It looks like apartheid, it talks like apartheid, it is apartheid.
We have seen children, a 6-year-old Palestinian murdered in Chicago, 3 Arab American students shot in Vermont. Last week, the attempted drowning of a baby for being Palestinian American. And we witnessed a presidential debate in which one of the candidates used the word Palestinian as a slur. He used it against the other candidate whose policies have been responsible for the deaths and the slaughter of tens of thousands of Palestinians. And that candidate said nothing in response. I have worked for the equal humanity of Palestinians and Israelis, of Muslims, of Christians, of Jews. I have seen the other side of this, not the hatred, but the love. I have made so many Palestinian friends. I have seen the love of that culture, the warmth of its people, and the resilience of its people. And as I stand before you, all I can say to former President Trump, to current President Biden, and to all of our fellow Americans is this: it would be the honor of my life to be called a Palestinian.
I mean, do you believe in a two-state solution?
I don't believe in any solutions, Ron. I don't talk about 1 state, 2 states, 3 states, because all of it is nonsense. All of it is pie in the sky. None of it's happening. My position is I want equality for Palestinians and Israelis, Jews, Muslims, Christians living in that part of the world.
Exactly the same human rights for all.
Exactly.
On that, I agree with you.
I don't care about the structures. I don't care what the name of the place is, what the government looks like. I want equality between the river and the sea, to use a phrase, for everyone living in that patch of land. No one's leaving. I don't believe any of those people are going anywhere. They're all staying. They all have to live side by side as equals. I'm a Democrat. I believe it should be a democracy. But fundamentally, right now, I'm only concerned about one thing: stop the killing, stop the genocide.
Let me ask you a simple question, okay? If you're at war with Gaza, why are you shooting children in the skull and in the chest? Why are you killing journalists? Why are you killing medics? Why are you killing UN workers? We have the x-rays in front of us. If you're engaged in the war with Hamas, why is it that Human Rights Watch put out a report? They tell people where to flee. They say go to the safe zones. Human Rights Watch says when the people are directed, they're being shot at the road.
But are you seriously saying but hang on.
When they get
Let me respond.
When they get to the safe areas,
I understand. I've already made that point.
Israel drops 2,000-pound bombs.
I've made that very point.
Does that sound like a war?
No,
or does that sound like a genocide?
This world's reality.
The world tells us that nothing can justify October 7th, and yet everything that Israel has done since October 7th can be justified by October 7th. That's a distorted world, and we have to understand what this occupation has meant. It's been violent from day one. The Nakba was violent, and what we're seeing today is a continuation of that Nakba. For world order to be restored, we need to have a system where all states are held to account.
For many, many years, there has been the advocacy of a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East. There's a nuclear weapon-free zone in Latin America. There's a nuclear weapons-free zone in Africa. There's a nuclear weapons-free zone in the South Pacific. And there has been a strong advocacy to turn the Middle East into a nuclear weapons-free zone. The last vote was taken in the UN General Assembly in December 2022. The vote was 175 states, including Iran, in favor of a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East, 1 against Israel, and 2 abstentions, Singapore and the United States. So, I think there's a very real danger of a nuclear escalation in the Middle East because Israel is, as the New York Times called it this past week, they called Israel a rogue state. That's the euphemism for a lunatic state. Israel is a lunatic state.
They're not the fucking most moral army. That's all fucking bullshit. I think they had JFK assassinated. The first thing that he wanted to do right before he died was make AIPAC a foreign entity. Netanyahu lied to us about weapons of mass destruction. We fought all these fucking wars. My friends have died over there. I just look at what they provided us with. They've actually done things to hurt us over and over and over again. So this whole thing of they're our greatest allies is just complete fucking bullshit. And, you know, we send them $100 billion, then they send AIPAC $100 million, and then they distribute it to our politicians, and every politician is a little fucking AIPAC handler walking around and telling them what to fucking say and how to vote.
Welcome to the world of double standards. On which side of history are you going to be on? What will the books of history say about you? What are you going to tell your people if you happen to vote against this resolution or even abstain? What excuse are you going to use to justify such decision? If you can't vote for peace and justice and against occupation and illegal settlements, how will you be able to ask for support if one day you're occupied? How will you explain if your government supports in any way such occupation in violation of international law and not hold those who do so accountable? And what will you say to those who will aim at you and say,
Hamas doesn't recognize the right of Israel to exist?
You know what that sounds like to me? That sounds like the African National Congress and Nelson Mandela refusing to accept apartheid and recognize apartheid. I say that Israel, if it wants to be a genuine partner in any kind of peace, needs to destroy its whole ideology of Zionism. Zionism that makes other people goyim, who do not deserve to be in the Holy Land. That's the real problem. If Israel will embrace every people, including Palestinians, equally, human rights respected across the board, then I would challenge Hamas to change its charter and say we will acknowledge Israel. But until that time, I see no difference between Nelson Mandela and Hamas in refusing to accept apartheid or the Zionist Israeli state.
Any country in the world that had October the 7th perpetrated against them would do what Israel has done.
They would have killed kids at this level. So you think Yahya Sinwar is a terrorist, right? Yeah. And there was an arrest warrant request for Yahya Sinwar from the International Criminal Court Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan. He's also put out an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu. And the indictments he's put out include starvation, murder, willful killing, extermination. How is Netanyahu not a terrorist, Piers?
Well, it may end up being that he is convicted of war crimes that suggest he's a terrorist.
But Sinwar wasn't convicted of.
Well, Sinwar.
I'm just being consistent. The ICC chief prosecutor put out warrant requests for both.
Here's the difference. Hamas made no secret of what they did on October the 7th. Sinwar directed and ordered that attack. No one
Nor is
disputes
Israel.
that. Yeah, but what the difference is that Hamas said, here are the GoPro cameras. We are going to show the world what we're doing here.
So is Israel. I just mentioned a video where a kid is killed on camera.
You're not going to get me to say that what Israel's been doing is terrorism.
Dang, you are going to be defeated. Watch this exchange highlight how American politicians are puppets for Israel.
Anyone who gets in the way, even if they are politicians in the West, they are going to fall.
Did you hear what he just said? He threatened politicians in the West that if they don't agree with Israel's war against Iran, that they're going to fall. And remember, he's an Israeli agent. Are you saying Israel will murder politicians in the West or get rid of them politically through bribery or whatever else? What do you mean the politicians in the West will fall?
We will not vote for them anymore. And we have the right to bring them up and to bring them down.
Okay, so let me answer it because he's not. AIPAC's going to come in and say, hey, if you work for Israel, we'll give you a lot of money. If you don't work for Israel, we'll give that money to your political opponent and we'll eliminate you politically. And that is where we are here in America. In a sense, the United States is occupied territory.
One of my big problems with Israel and the IDF is they haven't let journalists go in and verify anything that they're doing. What if actually war crimes have been committed on quite a wholesale basis? You seem to be absolutely certain that there's no war crime that's been committed. But how can you be certain? We come back to the media being banned from going in there. If you don't let the media in, then I'm afraid as a journalist, I'm like, what are they hiding? It is an act of self-harm, unless they are literally covering up war crimes.
2 people's under foreign occupation, 2 people's having their hospitals bombed, 2 people's having their kids killed, 2 people facing governments that say genocidal stuff. I'm consistent. I take the side of the Ukrainian people under occupation and the Palestinian people under occupation.
No, you're not. They're totally different situations.
You have to say that because you're not consistent.
And one is a democracy and an ally of the West.
Yeah, what's that got to do with anything? So allies of the West get to be genocidal?
No, I think it's important you support.
So if you're an ally of the West, you get to kill kids?
No. You get
so why is it relevant?
You support.
You're making my point for me, Piers. I'm consistent. I don't care whether you're an ally of the West or an enemy of the West.
Fine.
I care about what you do.
Yes.
And Russia and Israel both committing war crimes, both saying genocidal stuff.
Kill enough of them, we're going to end Hamas.
I didn't say that either.
I want to play it back. They're not going to eliminate Hamas. Hamas is an idea, not a group of people.
This thing we've heard a lot of times, you can't kill an idea. You said, well, we did after World War II.
Until now.
We did kill a lot of Japanese, and that was unfortunate.
Right.
But I mean, if you do kill enough lunatics, so let's not pretend that you can't actually get to the root of this. It is difficult.
You want to kill every human being?
No. Is that what I said?
No, but I think it is what you were leading to.
No, it is certainly not what I'm leading to. What I'm saying
If
is...
we kill enough of them, we're going to end Hamas.
I didn't say that either.
I want to play it back. You know, World War II, we did not kill Nazism.
Yeah, we did.
Except for like a moment. It's back almost in every country.
Do you value the lives of the Palestinian children? Greater Israel is an absolutely declared intention plan. And guess who stands in the way of Greater Israel more than anybody else? The Palestinians, because they have a lawful claim to that land. Historic Palestine is known as a factual reality. It's in the Bible, which you may or may not care about. The bottom line is the history books make this clear. Jesus was a Palestinian from Nazareth, no less. These are the descendants of Jesus of Nazareth. Whether you love him, hate him, acknowledge him.
The killing of that American Aishinur Ejip, what's your message for Americans who are concerned that you are providing military aid to a country that is killing U.S. citizens? And is there ever a point at which the killing of Americans could lead to a change in U.S. policy of weapons provision?
The most important thing to do is to gather the facts. Any actions that we take are driven by the facts. So first things first, let's find out exactly what happened, and we will draw the necessary conclusions and consequences from that.
I was on the Zionist side for years. I worked for Prager University, I worked for Daily Wire, and so I was much more sympathetic to, I would say, the Zionist cause throughout my entire career. Social media completely transformed my perspective on what's happening in Israel and Palestine. With the access of social media, being able to see these things every day versus the person who reads the newspaper, this colors their worldview, is very different. For the first time ever, we were just able to see what was happening in Palestine. Before, we just had to rely on legacy media. What you should do is examine the facts. When I started to do that, what I started noticing was I wasn't even allowed to ask a question. So I'd see something and then I'd say, well, what is this? And then suddenly it was anti-Semitism. And that right there to me signals you're not telling me the truth because you shouldn't have to do that.
Hamas, in some ways, through all of this discussion we're having, is being rewarded, is it not?
In what way is it being rewarded?
They are getting their issues debated like
But they're
never
not their
before.
issues. They don't belong to Hamas. They belong to the whole Palestinian people. The Hamas are the ones who are willing to fight to make their point. But what I would say is, and I mean this most sincerely, I hear people here say all lives matter, and I hear people say that they cringe and they recoil when they see the violence of the Israeli state in Gaza. But I have to say, I don't hear anybody who's willing to stand up and fight for the Palestinians. I don't hear anybody who's willing to put their political or their economic credentials on the line to save Palestinian lives. If you leave a vacuum where you're not fighting for the Palestinians, yes, Hamas are going to fill that vacuum every single day of the week. If you don't want Hamas in the center of the field, take the center of the field. Fight for the Palestinians.
Hezbollah's first response to October the 7th was to unleash rockets on Israel.
That's not true.
On October the 8th.
That's not true. That's not true.
That is what happened.
Where did they fire the first rocket?
They fired rockets on the 8th.
Where?
Well, you tell me.
No, you just said they fired at Israel. Where?
Well, they fired in the direction of Israel.
Where did they hit? They fired at the
if you know
Sheba
the
Farms.
answer, tell me.
I do. They fired at the Sheba Farms, which, as I said earlier, is an area of Syria. Well, the Lebanese claim it's Lebanon. Syria claims it's Lebanon. Israel says no and is occupying the Sheba Farms. They fired at Israeli military installations in the Sheba Farms. I can remember, Piers, Israel is occupying Syria and the West Bank and Gaza. And Lebanon would argue parts of Lebanon. This is the problem, right? The core of the problem is Israel's territorial expansionism.
It's a mess.
Attacks, not a mess. It's Israel occupying multiple Arab lands, which leads to quote-unquote resistance or quote-unquote terrorism. That is the core.
How many civilians are we allowed to watch die? What I have witnessed is a defenseless people getting pummeled from the air by one of the most sophisticated and powerful militaries on this planet. The Israeli government have occupied Palestinian land in contravention of international law. They have blockaded Palestinian territory in contravention of international law. They have built and enlarged settlements in contravention of international law, enforced an apartheid system that strips Palestinians of the most basic civic and human rights, and they have also targeted and killed civilians on a mass scale for decades. And the response of the Western world is what? Israel has a right to defend itself. Well, what exactly does that mean? The way Israel takes that to mean is that they can cut off food, that they can cut off the power, that they can cut off water, that they can enforce the displacement of over 1 million citizens in what has been described as an open-air prison.
It is with regret that I inform the House today the assessment I have received leaves me unable to conclude anything other than that for certain UK arms exports to Israel, there does exist a clear risk that they might be used to commit or facilitate a serious violation of international humanitarian law. I have informed my Right Honourable friend, the Business and Trade Secretary, and he is therefore today announcing the suspension of around 30 from a total of approximately 350. These include equipment that we assess is for use in the current conflict in Gaza, such as important components which go into military aircraft, including fighter aircraft, helicopters and drones, as well as items which facilitate ground targeting.
The U.S. says it demands respect for press colleagues, then Israeli forces kill our colleague Shireen Abu Akleh and scores of Palestinian journalists. The U.S. says it supports aid workers, then Israeli forces kill American Jacob Flickinger and plenty of other aid workers, including Palestinians. The U.S. says it condemns illegal settlement activity, and then Israeli forces kill Aisha Oregi, Rachel Corrie, and scores of Palestinians subject to settler violence. Another New Jersey teacher last month was shot by Israeli forces as he did the same thing Aisha was doing. How many more Palestinians and how many more Americans killed, violated will it take before this administration actually does announce a policy change?
You accept there have been war crimes?
Yes.
So you would support an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu?
I didn't say that.
Why?
I don't know if you can hold a prime minister responsible if a sergeant kills several unarmed people intentionally.
A few moments later.
Each mission of the Israeli Air Force, and it's probably the most accurate and efficient arm of the Israeli military, is checked beforehand by a lawyer, etc., to see if there are actual, is there evidence, evidence of
I'm so glad
Hamas
you're pointing
being
this
in there.
out, because it's not a rogue operation. It goes all the way up. See, we can indict Netanyahu for these attacks, because it's gone up the chain of command.
The UN is under attack. Our United Nations is facing a crisis that strikes at its very legitimacy and threatens a collapse of global trust and moral authority. UN aid trucks sit motionless just miles away from starving Palestinians. Humanitarian workers are disparaged and targeted. And the rulings of the UN's International Court of Justice are defied, its opinions disregarded. The harsh reality many see is that some nations are above international law, that global justice does bend to the will of power, and that human rights are selective, a privilege to be granted or denied at will. We cannot stand for that, and we must recognize that undermining our international institutions and global frameworks is one of the gravest threats to our global security today.
Maybe if we were Ukrainians with blonde hair and blue eyes, the world would rage and rant for us. But because we are Palestinians, we have only one right, which is to die.
Watch as this journalist calls out the entire Western media.
459 days of the most well-documented and first live-streamed genocide in history. You've seen us killed in every possible way. We've been immolated, incinerated, dismembered, and disemboweled. And recently, we've been freezing to death. How many journalists should be killed so you can act and stop Israel's impunity against us? Our message is very clear. We are journalists. We have been let down by the international community, particularly the international media organizations. We want you to stand with us because we are like any other journalists, reporters and media workers all across the globe, no matter the origin, the color, or the race. Journalism is not a crime. We are not a target.
You have accomplished absolutely nothing but incite hatred and violence while claiming to be an advocate for peace. 2 decades proposing resolutions which stir chaos, sow division, and avoid any hope. Mr. Mansour, you are a terrorist in a suit. I demand you to condemn Hamas. If you do not condemn them, you are one of them.
who stopped you from implementing Resolution 2735, which starts with a ceasefire, which guarantees the release of the hostages and the prisoners? Who is stopping you from implementing this resolution? Who is stopping you from acting and saying, on date so-and-so, at hour so-and-so, a ceasefire will take place, and we will see who will allow it to happen and those who will not allow it to happen, and therefore make them to pay the consequences of their rejection of the will of the Security Council through its resolution.
I happen to think it's a genocide, but you have called that accusation absurd. Why?
Incidentally, the numbers are all issued by Hamas. We don't know how true they are. But if there was genocidal intent by the Israeli government with the Israeli military machine to commit genocide in Gaza, there would not be 30,000 or 20,000 Gazans dead. There would be hundreds of thousands of Gazans dead.
Benny, we've already discussed that's not the definition of genocide.
Every human rights organization has been defining this as a genocide.
Nobody has asked the American people anything about all these wars for decades. And by the way, I can tell you, and I'm telling you authoritatively and truly, they lie about every goddamn thing about these wars. And so on the war and peace issues, the public has no say at all. Where's the democracy in this? This is the deep state, and they have their wars. Some wars the American people are basically never told about. For example, the war in Syria. And you may actually hear from grown-up reporters who are lying through their teeth or ignorant beyond imagining that, oh, the war in Syria, yes, Russia intervened in Syria. Well, do you know that Obama tasked the CIA to overthrow the Syrian government starting 4 years before Russia intervened? This is not democracy. This is a game. And it's a game of narrative.
So the biggest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. How should Israel have reacted in that situation in the real world?
What in the real world should the Palestinians have done if they tried negotiations, they gestured to supporting either a two-state settlement, when in March, beginning March 30th, 2018, they tried non-violent civil resistance? And what was the Israeli response? It was a 250-page single-spaced UN report describing the response. Israel took its best snipers, lined them up along the perimeter fence, and while there was this festive atmosphere among the Palestinians, the snipers, I'm quoting the report, intentionally targeted children, medics, journalists, disabled people. They described double amputees 300 meters from the perimeter fence that Israel shot. When they didn't kill them, they targeted them from the kneecap down. One Israeli sniper boasted to Haaretz newspaper, he shot 42 kneecaps in one day, 42 children and adults paralyzed for life. And so when all the options of diplomacy, nonviolent civil resistance, when they've been exhausted, what were they supposed to do?
As an American, your politicians are being bought for $100 million, and because of that, your country will send 26 billion to a different country. Yeah. 26 billion that could have been spent in my own country, in my own community. And I ask Americans, guys, you're supposed to be like the from a country for the people, by the people, and then suddenly your elections is being dictated by a different country. How does it work? Don't we as Americans deserve the $26 billion?
Oh, I agree.
So yes, guys, our neighborhood is shit. We have no sewage, no education, but God bless Israel. It doesn't, you're basically having a lot of people elected for your Congress to look for a different country.
We have seen children, a 6-year-old Palestinian murdered in Chicago, 3 Arab American students shot in Vermont. Last week, the attempted drowning of a baby for being Palestinian American. And we witnessed a presidential debate in which one of the candidates used the word Palestinian as a slur. He used it against the other candidate whose policies have been responsible for the deaths and the slaughter of tens of thousands of Palestinians. And that candidate said nothing in response. I have worked for the equal humanity of Palestinians and Israelis, of Muslims, of Christians, of Jews. I have seen the other side of this, not the hatred, but the love. I have made so many Palestinian friends. I have seen the love of that culture, the warmth of its people, and the resilience of its people. And as I stand before you, all I can say to former President Trump, to current President Biden, and to all of our fellow Americans is this: it would be the honor of my life to be called a Palestinian.
When you heard that Sinwar, the Hamas leader, had been killed, what were your feelings about that?
Well, when I heard he was killed, I said like, oh wow, that's actually, he survived all of that. But I think it was a huge mistake by the Israelis to release the footage, because now he's an icon, right?
Is he?
Well, I mean, again,
someone's
terrorist is someone else's hero, right?
Right. All he did was lob a piece of wood at them. That was it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he was also like, he was lost an arm and he was there, and it took them 3 tanks to bring down the house. I mean, hey, you can respect your enemy.
The Israelis shot down a civilian aircraft. In 1978 or 79, the Israelis shot down a Libyan civilian aircraft. President Nixon sent a wire to Gaddafi and to Sadat apologizing for this incident. There was no talk about it going into the United Nations. The International Pilots Associations had their meeting. There was 102 nations that voted to condemn Israel and 4 that voted not to, and the American representative abstained. Why? Because we couldn't create an enemy there. But when the Soviets shoot down an airliner, the same situation, we rise in moral outrage against this act. What is the difference?
There are 5 times more Palestinians today than there were in 1950. It is the worst, most ineffective genocide in the history of genocide. The idea that Israel wants to starve the Palestinians is vile. It is another left-wing atrocity on language, like Israel is committing genocide. Genocide has been raped like the word racism has been raped.
Did he say I rape words?
Yes, you rape words.
Well,
I know you find that funny. It isn't funny.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I think, first of all, that what you've done then by your own definition is rape of the English language and rape of the word rape. Let alone the fact that, of course, anytime anybody criticizes Israel, what do you guys all say? Anti-Semitism. Have you raped that word?
That's not true. That's a lie.
When Israeli intelligence knows everything with microscopic detail, and they accidentally missed the largest attack on Israel on October 7th, those guys who know everything and where everyone is, they knew exactly where Hassan Nasrallah was, they knew exactly where the leadership was, but golly gee, we missed October 7th, and golly gee, we missed Yahya Sinwar, and instead we killed 42,000 people in Gaza, over 30,000 women and children, and then they've now killed over 2,000 in Lebanon. And they're saying, oh, we're not the terrorists Yahya Sinwar is, because we accidentally killed 30,000 women and children, slaughtered them, and oftentimes with headshots.
This is for Gaza. You will pay a high price for the role that you have played in enabling, encouraging, and covering for the catastrophe presently going on in occupied Palestine in the Gaza Strip. I want to tell Mr. Starmer above all that the plates have shifted tonight. Keir Starmer's problems just got 100 times more serious than they were before today. This is going to spark a movement, a landslide, a shifting of the tectonic plates in scores of parliamentary constituencies, beginning here in the northwest. Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak are 2 cheeks of the same backside, and they both got well and truly spanked tonight here in Rochdale.
To truly grasp the events of October 7th, we must journey back to 1948. Before the Nakba, Gaza was home to Jewish, Christian, and Muslim communities, coexisting side by side. Then came the catastrophe. Israeli forces displaced 700,000 Palestinians, forcing many into Gaza. With Egypt not an option, Gaza transformed into a vast refugee camp, crammed into just 2% of historical Palestine. Things deteriorated further. In 1967, Gaza fell under Israeli occupation, and since 2007, it's endured a relentless siege. Millions are trapped, living in dire conditions. October 7th wasn't the beginning. It was a culmination sprouting from decades of suffering, displacement, and occupation. Ignoring this history means missing the roots of the struggle. This didn't happen overnight. It's been building for generations. To understand today, we must remember yesterday.
Regarding killing of Ayşenur, all the information available indicate that she was killed by an Israeli sniper. Eyewitnesses say that she was killed by an Israeli sniper. Autopsy report say that she was shot in the head. Our ally, NATO ally, Turkey says that she was murdered by Israel. So what sort of information you are looking for? Do you have any doubt that she was killed by Israel?
Our partners in Israel have indicated that they are conducting a process and that they will make public their findings. Again, we expect that to happen as swiftly as possible, and we expect that process to be thorough. We're going to let that process play out.
But you were very quick to determine that Israeli-American Hersh Goldberg was killed by Hamas in Gaza. And have you ever sought for further information regarding his killing? And if, why haven't you shown the same quick response and reaction to the killing of Ayşenur? Ayşenur's family called for an independent investigation. Would you support this call?
So we expect Israel to make their findings public. Beyond that, I'm just not going to get ahead.
How much longer can this continue? How many more tragedies must happen before action is taken? Can this council look at the children, the people of Gaza, in the eye and swear that no stone has been left unturned to end their suffering? violence in Gaza has now killed almost 40,000 Palestinians and injured more than 90,000 others. Some 10,000 people remain unaccounted for and are thought to be buried under the rubble. More than 60% of residential buildings and 65% of the road network have been damaged or destroyed. In just 2 weeks, more than 250,000 people have been displaced. There's no protection of civilians in Gaza. They're repeatedly being killed and injured in the very places they've been told were safe to go. What we're seeing in Gaza is the result of a war waged with pitiful, if any, regard for the requirements of international law.
What I have a right to demand is that my own country doesn't collaborate with it. When Hitler was doing it, at least my own country was making war against him. Now that Zionism is doing it, my own country is making war on the victims of that Zionist ideology.
Why aren't you taking in any Palestinians? Why is Egypt not taking Palestinians? Why does the Arab world want to constantly attack Israel without actually offering any place to go for the Palestinians? And what do you say to that?
That is exactly what Israel wants. This is the worst solution. These are Palestinians, these are their lands, and then suddenly take them. Why? So they've been basically kicked around from their homes, and now another country should take them? You see what will happen? Imagine this now. And because Israeli official has been talking openly about this, it's like, why don't they just go in Sinai? Why they go? You know what would happen? Those people are going to be pushed in Sinai, and then they will go to the West Bank, and suddenly those 3.5 million people push into Jordan. The whole idea, why does Jordan take them? Why does Egypt take them? The same question. Europe has 44 countries. Why don't they take Israel?
Benjamin Netanyahu said, fundamentally, if you're anti-Zionist, you're anti-Semitic.
We have reached the point where anti-Semitism is identified today, not just with anti-Zionism, but with criticism of Israel. If you criticize Israel, people will say you're an anti-Semite. And if that's your definition of anti-Semitism, it's taken an important term and stretched it to the point where it's meaningless. We've gotten to the point now where people are so interested in stopping any criticism of Israel that they wield this weapon of calling people anti-Semites so loosely that the term has lost meaning. So I think Netanyahu is wrong-headed to equate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism.
You are an anti-Semite.
Anti-Semitic.
Anti-Semite. Classic example of anti-Semitism.
Criticizing a government's actions doesn't make you anti-Semitic. Let's get real. Anti-Semitism means hostility toward Jewish people, not disagreeing with Israeli policy. Do we call someone anti-Christian for opposing America's actions? So why has this label become a weapon to silence dissent? Thousands of Jews around the world have protested Israel's actions. Are they anti-Semitic too? It's absurd that even atheists are out here calling Jews anti-Semitic for speaking out. Criticizing a government is not hate, it's accountability. Stop twisting definitions to shut down debate. We can stand against prejudice and demand justice. Those ideas aren't mutually exclusive.
I'm very concerned with American taxes going towards the funding of a genocide in Gaza, going towards the killing of a 19-year-old guy who's in an IV in a hospital bed, going towards the killing of children in a school, going towards the killing of 23 people from one family in Lebanon by your military. 2 babies killed, Jonathan. You serve a military that has been credibly accused by the United Nations, by Israeli media, of mass rape of Palestinian detainees. The New York Times reported that your military sent Palestinian children as human shields into booby-trapped tunnels and buildings. The World Food Programme is saying your military is starving the people of northern Gaza. What do you stand for? Starvation? Mass rape? Ethnic cleansing? Genocide? Every human rights group in the world says your military is an abuser of human rights. I don't know how many human rights you yourself have personally abused. I don't know if you turned a blind eye to rape on your custody. I don't know if you killed children at point-blank range like Israeli snipers did to people carrying white flags. You can tell us today.
If the Israeli army wanted to kill as many people as they can, there'd be no people left there.
Israel is bombing people deliberately, bombing areas of tents and hospitals. You've bombed refugee camps, as Piers pointed out. You've bombed schools, as I've pointed out, and you've bombed a Lebanese Christian town and killed 23 people from one family, including 2 babies. You've bombed UN peacekeeping soldiers from Ireland and Italy, who are not Hamas or Hezbollah either. Israel is bombing people deliberately. We don't need your word for that. We've seen hundreds of TikToks of them bragging about their violence inside of Gaza and now Lebanon. Here are the facts that people can go look up for themselves. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the UN Human Rights Office, UNICEF, UNHCR, Save the Children, World Food Programme, WHO, Doctors Without Borders, I can keep going, Refugees International, International Rescue, they all, Care International, Christian Aid, Physicians for Human Rights. They all say the Israeli military is to blame for the casualties, for the killing of innocent people, for not giving warnings, for bombing civilian targets, and for starving the people of northern Gaza.
I want you to put your finger on what hurts the most. Yes. It's the logic that you started and many of your colleagues here that make us feel that our lives do not matter as much.
I understand.
That in some reason our blood has a different color, that we are less of a human being, that we are the children of a lesser God.
Right.
When in fact the people of Palestine, wherever they go, they build. This is a people struggle for 100 years. And the people have not giving up the absolute right for freedom.
Israel is not above the law. Israel cannot deny Palestinians the right to live, the right to go to school, the right to eat, and the right to breathe, and the right to hope. UNRWA is there to help Palestinian refugees by the United Nations. Is it a threat to feed children? No. Is it a threat to allow children to go to school? Is it a threat to vaccinate people against polio? Is it a threat to say the Palestinian people have rights? And where is the threat? I mean, it is ridiculous to assume that a United Nations agency mandated with a humanitarian work could be a threat to anybody. UNRWA is not a threat.
It is undeniable that the root cause of the violence is Israel, Israel's occupation, the genocide in Gaza. What did the leader of Hezbollah say? He said, we won't fire any rockets if you end the killing in Gaza. What did the president of Iran say? We won't retaliate for what you did to Ismail Haniyeh on Iranian soil if you end the killing in Gaza. What did the Houthis say? We'll stop blocking ships if you end the killing in Gaza. Where do all roads lead back to?
When you have a foreign lobby that works for an external country, that is not normal thing. Imagine a lobby that is openly funded by China, and that lobby going there and buying seats for people who are pro-China.
It seemed like unfair.
It should not be accepted in a democratic country.
Yeah.
But the problem is the government that should curb the influence of a foreign lobby is being paid.
If you've made it this far, then you're a real supporter. Don't forget to subscribe to see more.